So I saw this blog thing a while back from some guy called Son of Carey, and it was so hilariously arrogant that I knew I had to cover it eventually. But when I remembered, for some reason, the website has become inaccessible. Now, I doubt it's because they had some epiphany and realized everything they wrote on it was idiotic nonsense, because that would require the kind of self-awareness that would prevent anyone from writing the following in the first place. So I'm betting it's pure laziness or incompetence that has made it currently inaccessible. Luckily, I copied it down at the time. And either way, the contents of this particular article are so spectacularly stupid, it needed to be saved for posterity. 10 questions atheists can't answer. Oh, I just love these. I mean, at this point, you would think that one of these folks somewhere might have run across all or some of these questions out in the wild, rather easily being answered by atheists, but they never do. It's almost like the kind of person who thinks an entire group of people can't do a really simple task might all be a bunch of massive idiots who don't understand how words work. Atheism works, or the fact that literally any question can have some kind of response to it, and it does not matter if you don't like the response, but oh well. When I say atheists can't answer these questions, I mean they can't answer them smoothly, persuasively, coherently, or popularly. Well, I don't know what the hell smoothly is supposed to mean in this context. An answer is an answer. Doesn't matter if it's smooth, extra smooth, or chunky style. And again, you don't have to be persuaded for it to be an answer. And the fact is, you likely can't be persuaded from your current position at all, because I will bet you have decided that you're already correct, and thus any answer is just people being wrong at you. And finally, coherence and popularity. Your inability to understand what is being said at you is your problem, not mine. And if you think that popularity has any influence on something's factual accuracy, boy do I have some bad news for you. About whatever thing you believe, turns out there are other versions of it that are pretty popular, making them correct by your standard, because that's how that works, obviously. Of course, any question can receive a stumbling word salad from the person questioned, but these questions completely defy the system because it is false. See, I told you this asshole has already decided that he was correct. Although I have no idea what the hell the guy means by system. What system? You have to define a system for them to defy it before you can say that they do. Not simply allude to one, goddammit. And so, any answer he gets, regardless of its actual competence, is automatically going to be dismissed and disregarded, probably especially when either convincing or simply too difficult for his teeny tiny bean brain to understand. You used more than 5 words. That is word salad. Ah! Why are some things always bad? Why is there a category of badness, evil, or wickedness? Okay, 2 main points for this one. First off, if you are asking why are there things that everyone agrees are bad, well, there literally aren't. There is 0 things that everyone on the planet agree as good or bad. Because, well, not to brute fact it, but that's just how it be. But if you want to ask the more broadly accurate why do most people see certain things as bad, well, it's really quite simple, my good dumbass. It's because bad things are usually defined by their negative effect on people, the world, or in the case of really, really bad things, both. If something is beneficial and everyone likes it, and it has little to no downsides, people will see that as good. If on the other hand something causes pain and suffering and sadness and despair, making life harder or even unbearable with little to no upside, well, people are in fact very likely to see that as a bad thing. Secondly, the question you really need to be asking yourself is, why are some things considered bad only some of the time, or only during specific times in history, or the opposite even? Why were some things considered good, or at least fine, and now are considered some of the most heinous acts in history? How could that be possible in a world where anything is always bad? I'm betting your likely answer of things are bad cause God say so doesn't stand up, when for some reason his opinions will change. Where do the laws of logic come from? The laws of logic come from humans, because the laws of logic are simply a set of descriptive explanations of how certain things appear to function in reality. Now, if you're asking the way it works or where does it come from, well, it appears to come from the universe. I mean, I haven't checked any of the other ones recently, but it seems to be that the place you currently exist has a set of rules that it sticks to fairly strictly. Same with how the universal constants are things that happen in this universe. As for why it does that, I don't know. But more importantly, neither do you. And you might say, well, actually, I have this book written by people who are unaware of the continents of America and Oceania, or probably what a continent even is, let alone what the stars are, or how planets work. But they totally knew the fundamentals of how reality works and where they came from, because they said they did, and that's good enough for me. Which is great and all, but it isn't good enough for me. Sorry, not sorry. How can we call people, nature, music, or virtues beautiful without a great beauty? Why beauty if no beauty? Oh man, I figured you didn't understand the idea of subjective values before, but now I know you don't understand them. Not even remotely, holy hell. Again, if you asked everyone on Earth about a single piece of artwork, one that is generally, an important word, considered to be excellent, if they all thought it was beautiful, hell, if they all thought it was at least good, you are not ever going to get the same answer in the positive from every single one of them. Taste is simply not, nor has it ever been, a matter of fact. So what could great beauty even mean in any respect? Like, even if a god created something that God thinks is the greatest beauty, then by the nature of aesthetics, not everyone is going to be able to agree to that, even if they wanted to. I mean, you can barely get people to agree on what the word art even means, what it takes for something to be a work of art as opposed to simply a thing a person did. And if we can't agree on even that, the hell makes you think we all agree in any one thing is even okay to look at? Where did the first material come from? From my giant flabby ass. No, wait, that's where your brain comes from. The first material came from, drumroll please, energy. That's right, the material in the universe has a well understood cause and origin. Shonk horong. Of all the questions so far, the idea that we couldn't possibly answer this one is particularly stupid, because it takes 5 seconds to look up. Now, I'm sure your smarmy face would hear that answer and sputter out a where did the energy come from? You didn't answer my question, I am very smart. But your failure to ask a coherent question in a way that actually asks what you meant it to ask, instead of what you wanted it to, is a you problem, not a problem with atheists or our ability, or even lack thereof, to do so. And the fact that it causes you to get an answer you don't like, or more importantly, couldn't hope to understand. You see, that's the problem with this whole article. When one is both extremely arrogant and exceptionally stupid, it exacerbates both flaws to an ironically galactic scale. Why do all, or nearly all, men believe in God, gods, or the God? Because they're all fucking idiots. I'm sorry, that's unfair. Just because someone agrees with this guy doesn't make them an idiot. Just most likely. And isn't that odd? You claim to believe that everyone has the exact understandings of various things. But for some reason, a thing that, if true, and has the expectations you would likely apply to it, would seem pretty damn important. Suddenly now, you understand that not everybody agrees on that. Although you seem to have skipped the whole, they also don't believe in the same God, or would even allow for that same definition of exactly what makes a god. But that is obviously too much for your tiny little mind. But frankly, far too many people believe in God that probably shouldn't, because human brains developed to have a bias for supernatural thinking. They see something they don't understand or cannot explain, and they will jump to, well, if I don't know why that happened, it must have been magic. I assume it's largely because humans are extremely curious as a species, so when something doesn't make any sense to them, a bad explanation is often perceived as a much greater value than no explanation, even if it's wrong. Why are atheist social experiments always violent, authoritarian, and cruel like Russia's or China's communism? Well, this one's the easiest so far. They simply aren't. That is nonsense. What is wrong with you? Also, to call these totalitarian regimes atheist social experiments is so wildly and I think intentionally dishonest. I would be surprised to find out if you're even capable of honesty. I have said it before and I'll say it again. As a rule, these kinds of governments didn't do atheism because it was their starting point and then worked up to let's kill a bunch of people. They did atheism because they didn't want to compete with other ideologies, because they often were the ideology. Why would you want to have to compete with God for the affection of your people when you can simply have them not have religion to turn to instead of your political cult that you have prescribed instead? And the fact that these totalitarian governments were violent is the same reason religious totalitarian governments tend to be violent. It's the totalitarianism, almost like there is a pattern there. Also, there are extremely secular governments that you would likely call atheist, and they are literally some of the least violent societies to have ever existed. Again, so much for always. If atheism is true, then why can't it produce as many good actions as Christianity? How about you define good? Because surely a good action can only be truly good if done out of the literal goodness of one's heart. If you do good because God tells you to, then that is coercion. And thus, literally, nothing done in the name of Christianity could ever be truly good. But more importantly, atheism produces good the same way it produces bad. It doesn't. Only an ideology tends to do that. Again, with the totalitarian thing, it seems that what the ideology is causing the harm. Whether or not it's religious or atheist seems to be entirely irrelevant, as of course plenty of Christians have caused terrible harm in the world over history. Also, the ability or lack thereof for something to produce nice things has absolutely no impact on its truth claim. Otherwise, the fact that there are good atheists who do good things, with no need for coercion, mind you, so that would add weight to its factuality, something that you would wholeheartedly disagree with. But that means that any good Christianity might produce also has no bearing on whether or not God does the real, and it never has. How can there be truth without God? What does meaning mean without a personal, absolute, logical word? Easily? You see, the reason we know that there are things that are factually accurate is a consequence of our testing reality. Fact is, God or no, if a universe is coherent, then it's coherent. Not to mention that one of the greatest demonstrations of an all-powerful God would actually be a universe that lacks coherence but works anyway. That would be a universe that at least potentially would need a God to explain it. Or at the very least, magic, aka any inconsistency in fantasy books can always be explained with a wizard did it. But the fact that the universe is something that can be made sense of means that God, or anything like it, is simply unnecessary. And hell, if God is real, he's made sure that we don't need him to do anything. Perhaps he's suggesting something. Perhaps that's exactly how he wants it, and you should stop phoning the poor guy at all hours, pestering him with your petty grievances, eh? Where are the inspiring historical examples of atheists who sacrificed themselves to serve an honorable cause? Like Corrie ten Boom in World War II, Jim Elliot in Ecuador, Paul Carson in the Congo, and the thousands of defenseless missionary martyrs like them. Are you joking? Do you think your historical ignorance simply erases the countless individuals who have existed throughout the years while secular, dying for causes most would agree were selflessly for the greater good? I mean, for God's non-existent sake. You start with World War II, a time in history where individuals were far more open to identifying as non-religious, and yet those same godless folk died to stop a madman from destroying the world. All of them doing these things that not only actually did things, unlike so many Christian martyrs who died simply because book though, and again did so with zero expectations of reward or threat of divine punishment. Why are the great works of beauty in sculpture, orchestra, architecture, and literature all created by theists, and mostly from a culture steeped in the Trinity? So you really do know nothing about the world outside your tiny, pathetic, thought-terminating bubble. Aside from the fact that great works of cultural significance have absolutely been made by atheists, I mean, come on, the Sursic Channel is the best thing since sliced whiskey, if I do say so myself. But let's assume you mean more along the lines of antiquity. Of course, things in the time where every prick was a god-bothering theist, everything, give or take, was in fact made by theists. Combine that with, again, even if theism inspires things people like, the fact that it was by theism doesn't suggest any particular god doing that. Or that, in fact, it was any god at all. Just the idea of one, which means nothing other than people with highly active imaginations can be pretty imaginative. Who'da thunk it? And again, since atheism became more of an actual thing, they have created countless works without the need for any sort of fakeismo. Seriously, it's like you have the general knowledge of a bucket of particularly stupid pig shit. Only with half the charm and not nearly as pleasant an odour, I'm sure. But that is what happens when you have literal garbage instead of a functioning brain. Atheism is bankrupt. It does not have a good historical record to receive the investment of your soul. You know what? If atheism is bankrupt, then your personal philosophy is clearly one of infinite debt, with seemingly no capacity to produce a human being with the depth of knowledge required to ask questions of anyone, let alone to judge the answers in any way that isn't, "Me no am understand that, it must do wrong." Since you have less produced a list of questions that atheism cannot answer and more written a damning tale of all the things about reality that you don't understand, have failed to properly grasp, leaving you utterly incapable of understanding anything. Better to hear the words of the wise man who said, "Strive to enter the narrow gate, because many will try to enter, but will not be able." And of course, I can only assume that anything that you think is wise must be the incoherent gibbering of a madman. And you're still welcome to think that, the same way I'm welcome to give you both an extremely wide berth in the supermarket, in case you both begin flinging human excrement, or worse, Bible verses at me.